my background's in science and math, and give me a math problem any day, but tell me to write something. And most people know that I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. But I was writing creative writing. I was writing what I wanted to write, what I thought was interesting and funny things, and it was enjoyable.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Flip Your Script is produced by Media Minefield, a public relations firm passionate about the power of sharing stories. Specializing in earned and social media, Media Minefield helps clients take control of their unique story and message. The show is hosted by Kristi Piehl, founder and CEO of Media Minefield, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
Over the course of a career, most people either choose or are forced to flip their script. Some changes are more dramatic than others. Maggie Aldrich went from a government analyst to a stay-at-home mom to a yoga instructor and is now an author. Those are all pretty dramatic shifts in and of themselves, much less to do it all in the course of a career. Maggie Aldrich, welcome to Flip Your Script.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So in thinking about all these switches that have happened in your professional career, how did you do all of those? Because even just government analyst to yoga instructor, that seems like a leap for me.
It was quite a leap. Stay-at-home mom is thrown in there, and that is what caused the change from government analyst. So I had a great job for a local government agency. I made a great salary. I actually, at one time, earned more than my husband did. I worked full time. And when my daughter was born, I went down to 4 days a week, thinking that extra day would help us get everything done. So it really just turned out that Friday that I didn't work was spent running errands, crazy fast across town and trying to get in everything that she and I couldn't do together during the week. And weekends were still spent cleaning house and doing errands around the house and doing yard work. And we live on an acreage, so yard work is hours and hours of work. And our life was just very chaotic, as every stay-at-home mom or dad knows. When both parents are working and you have a child, it's chaos. And I found myself being very anxious. We were all very anxious. We were all always on the go. And at the same time, my job, which had been something I enjoyed for a while, we got a new director in my agency, and that changed everything. My workload dramatically went down. And not that my job didn't have purpose. Once upon a time, I had a lot of work to do, and I had a lot of purpose, but it just got to a point where I didn't. And I couldn't reconcile with that. I couldn't come to terms with that. And I'm paying someone else to watch my baby, and I'm sitting here just to collect a nice paycheck. So I talked to my husband about it, and we decided to change our spending habits so that we could live on one income. And that's how I ended up quitting my job and becoming a stay-at-home mom. And then I did that for several years, and then I was also an avid yogi. I have scoliosis, and so my back hurts a lot, and I go to yoga, and that helps. At one of my yoga classes, the instructor had tried to find a sub. She was going out of town. She couldn't find a sub, and she ended up just not showing up, and the place that we go to didn't find her a sub either, so there was no teacher. So I said to the other people that were also there without an instructor, and I said, hey, I can teach a class if you want. Since we're all here. And they said, yeah, sure. So I taught a little 45-minute class, and then I told the instructor about it the next week, and she said, oh, that's great. Would you talk to administration, and would you ask them to hire you? We need more instructors. So yeah, that's how I went and became a yoga instructor several years later.
When you talked about something that is a hot button issue for a lot of people, and I want to talk about it a little bit more with you, which is this: I'm working, but my heart's at home. I'm not sure what to do. And a lot of men and women feel that. And of course, you're talking about pre-COVID. So it's a very different kind of navigation now when there's this home all the time, homeschooling, all these different things, that challenges for working parents.
Right.
Did you take any heat from people around you? Because one of the things that like really frustrates me in general about this conversation is it's also to me about people who make a choice to bottle feed or breastfeed. There's all this like heat around it. And I don't know why we can't just respect people's decisions, because every family is different. Every income is different. Every child is different. Every adult is different. So anyway, I'm interested to hear what kind of reaction you got when you left this job and chose for a short amount of time to be a full-time stay-at-home mom.
Right. I got a lot of flack. I got a lot of just absolute surprise. I had one child. I had worked full-time for 12 years, and I had my daughter, and I think people, a lot of people, even stay-at-home parents at the time thought, why are you quitting your job for one kid? As if one kid isn't as important as 5 kids or, however many kids you decide to have. We had one kid. That's how it worked out. God gave us one child. And I got a lot of people just not understanding, why would you leave your career for one kid? And I had people calling me 6 months down the road. Hey, I heard of this job opening. These are people that I had worked with. We've got a job opening in our department. Are you tired of being at home yet? No, I'm absolutely not tired of taking care of my child. I love this. And I quit when she was 3. So, 2 years later, she's going to kindergarten. And I got those same questions again. When are you going back? When are you going back to work? And I'm thinking, I do not want to go back to that. I do not want to go back to that lifestyle. It was chaos. It was anxiety. It was terrible. Just because she's in school from 8 to 3 doesn't mean she's in school 40 to 50 hours a week, 12 months a year. It doesn't mean that everything around our house is going to be taken care of by someone else. It's not. I still have things to do. And so it was very, very tough. And it's sad because I was raised by a stay-at-home mom. And I remember those days when almost everyone stayed at home. And I'm not saying that is the solution for everyone, but that is what I always hoped for in my life. And I certainly, I just surprised a lot of people when I decided to do it.
After my layoff, I was home with my kids for 18 months, mostly because I had to just get my head on straight. And I quickly realized that when you say I'm going to stay at home with my kids, people generally have some kind of comment back in some circles. And then when I said, this isn't for me, God bless the stay-at-home parents, but when my youngest is going to kindergarten, then I want to go back full-time doing something. That was just me. And it's such a personal choice. And you get flack both ways. And there isn't the right answer for everyone.
No, a lot of people, I got the constant comments of, what do you do all day? And I was like, well, I can really run through my schedule of events for you if you'd like that, but you're not going to give me any credit unless I say I'm going back to work outside the home, so it was very difficult.
And you leaned all the way into that choice, and your daughter is growing up, and you decide to start writing. Tell me about that, because so many authors have this seed that they want to write a book from the time that they're really little. And your path to publishing your first book was a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was younger, I was always good at writing, but I absolutely hated it. I got straight A's in English and I did well. I was constantly recognized over the years by my teachers for my writing and encouraged to keep writing, but I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the assignments that were given in English classes. I never liked the books we had to read, the essays we had to write, the way you have to have so many sentences per paragraph and you're graded on, your grammar and punctuation and at least the way I was taught, it was never really just write something creative. Just write something that comes to your mind. It was always an assignment. It was never enjoyable. So I'm a math and science girl. I majored in geography and environmental studies. I was a map maker and a database analyst. I was not a writer. But when I was in junior high, my English teacher, and I was in a big public school in Texas. I had 500 kids in my grade, and she assigned a project over spring break, which I thought was cruel and unusual punishment. And she said, write this 1,000-word essay. I don't remember what the specific topic was. But so I wrote it, I turned it in. Then a couple weeks later, she comes to me and says, Maggie, I want you to know that was so good that I found a contest to enter it in. And I was like, well, okay, that's weird because I hated writing it, and but I'm glad you liked it. And so she says, you didn't win, but I wanted you to know it was good enough that I felt it needed to be entered into something. Then I go through high school and I become a semifinalist for a nationwide scholarship. That was a really big scholarship. And I get called down to the office, and it was announced to the whole school, that I was the semifinalist for this huge scholarship. And it was based on my essay. It was an essay-driven scholarship. And again, I thought, I hated writing that. It was not enjoyable at all, but okay, whatever. I go through college and I go into the workforce. And when I was at my job, I was always the person that people came to for proofreading and editing and, help me reword this, help me write this, et cetera, et cetera. So I knew I was good at writing, but I hadn't enjoyed it at school. So then what brings, what makes me think I'm going to be a writer? It was basically because when my daughter went to school, I was facing all those questions of, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now, Maggie? Are you going to go back to work? And I knew I didn't want to go back to that 40 hours a week. I knew I didn't even want to go to something that was 20 hours a week unless I could do it from home. I needed to be available for my family. And my dad, out of the blue, sends me this blog post, job opening for a blogger. And he says, I think you'd be really good at this. And again, I think, that's just bizarre. Why would he say that? I'm not a writer. I don't like to write. And then I'm talking to my father-in-law, and he asks me, what are your plans? What do you want to do? And I tell him how I'm just kind of lost. I don't know what to do. I don't know what my skills are anymore because I don't want to go back into the field I was in. And he says, well, he tells me about his situation where he recreated his career because he got laid off. And he said, Maggie, you are a smart person. You are a driven person. You can do whatever you want. And, so I just kept that in my mind. I can do whatever I want. And I had reached the point, I know that you like books, and I had reached the point where, you find a good author, you read all their books, and then you're kind of lost when you're done with that author, and you're thinking, great, now I have to find someone else to follow. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try writing. I'm going to try writing books. I want to write something that my daughter would like to read. I want to write something that it comes from a strong female point of view. I want to write something a little bit different. And so I started researching how to write a novel. And it just went from there. I started taking classes online. I started doing little workshops online. And I actually wrote for a year without saying a word to anybody about it.
Ooh, secretly. Because
Yes.
were you embarrassed, or did you think they would judge you? Really?
Oh, yes. I was completely insecure. Again, I know I'm a good writer, but that's not my background. My background's in science and math, and give me a math problem any day. But tell me to write something, and most people know that I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. But I was writing creative writing. I was writing what I wanted to write, what I thought was interesting and funny things, and it was enjoyable. And so I don't keep anything from my husband, but I couldn't even share this with him. I was so insecure about it. And so finally, after a year, I am probably 90% done with my first book. And I finally sit down with him and I said, hey, so I want to tell you something. I've been writing a book. And he looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. And I mean, he just looked at me like he was so confused. And what was I talking about? And he just didn't get it. And I said, yeah, I've written a book. I'd like you to read it and tell me if you think it's any good. And he did. And I was so nervous because he reads Tom Clancy. He reads, shoot 'em up books about espionage, books about mystery, and I was writing chick lit, rom-com type books that are not the genre that he typically reads. And so I thought, wow, he's just going to hate it. But I really just wanted to know if it was worthy, if it was decently written, if it was even an interesting story. And he loved it. And that he's my husband, and typically you would think he'll love it no matter what it is. But I knew that he'd be honest with me and say, this sucks if it wasn't any good. So that was really hard presenting it to him.
So is it the vulnerability that you felt by giving him this thing that was almost done and saying, what do you think? Was that your feeling that you were really exposing something that you had kept hidden and now asking for feedback?
Yes. I felt like I was a fraud. I felt like I don't have an English background. I don't have a degree in English. I didn't go to a fancy school. I've never written for a publication before. I am just an average person who has a good grasp of the English language and can write. I have an overactive imagination. And so that's very helpful with coming up with stories. But I thought nobody's going to take me seriously. And I knew he was the first person I had to tell. I knew he would be my biggest support. And so I had to open up to him and share with him and gauge his reaction and my daughter's reaction, which was awesome, and go from there.
It's so fascinating to me because in so many people's kind of flip your script, especially in the career, the professional part of their life, it's the voices in their head that are saying, you can't, you don't have this, and you don't have this, and you don't have the education, you don't have the financing, you don't, whatever it might be. And when people can get past that and actually lean in, that's when not just the flip is possible, but really the opportunity in seeing what they're capable of. But so many people, I think, get stuck in their own head with, you can't do this. What are you doing? How dare you think you can do this? And they miss out on what's possible. Because if you would have kept to your passion and you were reading other people's work and thinking, I'm just a map maker, I can't do this. All these, all the things that you've put out into the world wouldn't be out there. And I imagine that you are a more complete version of yourself because you've allowed yourself to explore writing. Is that true?
Yes, I really, really enjoy it now. I love it because I can write about what I want to write about, what I think is fun. And I've grown a lot. I've learned a lot. I've done a ton of research. I belong to a bunch of author groups that have been very, very helpful. But it took me a while. I mean, even after I had published my first book, I was still completely insecure. Even after I was getting great reviews for it, I still thought I'm a fraud. I do not have this background. I should not be doing it. There are other people that should be doing this that would be more successful than I am. It was very hard for me to talk about my books for the first year or so. To pimp my books, for lack of a better word. It was hard for me to do that because I was met with a lot of, you're writing? It was such a foreign concept for people, even my family, to think that I wasn't in that mold. I was a science and math girl. I wasn't a writer. And so it was hard for me. And a lot of it was in my head, but a lot of it was also people's reactions. And a lot of people are, reacted in a positive way. And you really kind of see who your friends are based on people's reactions when you change your career to something that's unexpected. But yeah, it was difficult.
And it's so funny you say that, because I think if we think about a stereotype of a math science girl, it's something. And then you think about even what she wears, what she talks about, what movies she watches, all these things. And then you think about, what does an author look like and sound like and talk about and interested in and all these things. And the visual even is so different. And so it must have been really interesting for the people around you to watch you make the evolution. And you're still the same Maggie.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. If you ever look at, read the author bios of the books that you read, and you'll see, or I've noticed at least, the authors that I read tend to be from New York City. They tend to be, or have written publications, written for a magazine, written for a big college publication, or they are the child of a famous person. They've somehow already had their foot in the door. And or they have an English degree from, an Ivy League school. I had none of that. And so I know that people looked at me odd, and I myself, I felt like I'm not worthy, but I kept having to tell myself, I am a good writer. I am a good writer. When I first just decided to tell my family about it, my daughter said, well, Mom, she was very excited. She was about 11 at the time. And she said, well, Mom, you should enter this contest that I heard about at school. And there's a local author from Nebraska, Bess Streeter Aldrich, no relation to me at all, unfortunately. But she wrote in the early 1900s, and her foundation sponsors a short story competition every year for youth and adults. And her English teacher had told her class about it and was encouraging the kids to apply for the youth short story contest. So when I told her I was writing this book, she said, you should try to win the adult part of it. And I thought, no, because I don't write short stories, and I, can't use what I've already written. I'd have to write something different. And it was supposed to be in the spirit of Bess Streeter Aldrich, which was she wrote about like small towns and the pioneer lifestyle and all of that. But I thought I should do this for my daughter. I should do this to show her a good example of not giving up, of trying something different, of not being afraid to go ahead and put myself out there. So I did. I entered it. And she was going to enter it too, and she didn't. She ended up backing out. But so I entered it. And then a couple months later, I get the email announcing the winners, and I won. I won the adult part of it. And it was huge. The reaction I got from my daughter was something I'll never forget. She was so excited for me. She was so proud of me. And it was the validation I needed that a stranger thought I could write. A stranger thought I had something worth sharing.
And just that alone changed how you thought about yourself. Did it change your work? Did it change your outlook on your work? Or did it just validate it?
It validated it. It made me more excited that I might have a good reaction when I published my first book. It certainly looks good to say I'm an award-winning author. It may not be a huge award to someone from New York, but it is a nationwide contest, open nationwide, and it is validation for me. So it was very helpful. It kind of let me relax and think, okay, I can write things that people will want to read.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you give the book to your husband. He says you've got something. You win the contest. You believe now that you've got something. You put your first book out into the world. And tell me about just seeing your stuff in print. First of all, that must be a moment. And what kind of reception you received?
Again, for me, it was difficult. Again, I thought, okay, I wasn't super excited. I mean, when I got the books in the mail, my husband and my daughter were so excited. They were thrilled. My husband went and took copies to work. He showed everyone that he knew, and he talked about it to everyone that he knew. And I was still so insecure, I could hardly talk about it. I started running ads on Amazon, and I am telling people about it, but I'm still getting kind of that pushback from some of the people that mattered to me the most in my life of just, this is just weird. What are you doing? We don't get this. And so it took a long time for me to be comfortable with it. We display my books downstairs in our family room, and again, my husband never stops talking about it. His coworkers and friends always ask, that's the first thing they ask me about when they see me, and I'm more comfortable talking about it now. But for the first good year, it was hard for me to become excited because I still didn't know if I was any good.
So if I would meet you let's pretend that parties were happening and we would meet and I would say, my name is Kristi. Here's what I do. Would you say, my name is Maggie, I'm an author? Or would you say, my name is Maggie, I'm something else? Like, do you believe that your identity is connected to being an author, or are you still like struggling to get there?
I do believe it now. I've published 3 books now. I'm more comfortable saying, hi, I'm Maggie. I write fiction. I write, women's fiction, and I write a couple different types of women's fiction, and I'll go into that. But it took me a couple of years. It took me a couple of years to really be comfortable with that and to really believe what I was saying.
So you don't have the things that you talked about, some of the writers that you were reading, the background, the connections, the East Coast, all these things that seem to be a commonality. How did you break in? Or do you feel like you're still clawing your way there?
I feel like I'm still clawing my way there for sure. I have, like I said, I joined several Facebook writers groups. And some of these are really big groups with thousands and thousands of members, and some of them are smaller groups. I have followed some indie authors to learn how they publish, and I decided not to go through the agent route because I couldn't get an agent within a certain time frame, and I'm not a very patient person. And when you query an agent, you're supposed to have your book completed. And then if they like it, in 3 to 6 months, they'll get back to you. And then it's a matter of you as the author really have to bring the readers to the publisher. They don't go out and market the book for you. You have to bring the readers. It's very hard. It's ridiculous in my opinion. And it's no wonder that people that already have connections are the only ones that have success at this, because they have those connections. And here I am, stay-at-home Midwestern wife. I mean, I'm nothing special. I don't have a fan base. I mean, I do now, that it's a very small fan base. But when I first started, I had 0 fan base. And that's the hardest part. So networking is huge. It's very difficult for me, but it's something that's necessary. And getting into those writers groups really helps that. They give indie writers, indie authors are awesome about sharing information. They'll review your book blurb. They'll review your query to an agent. They'll give you ideas. They'll brainstorm things with you. So I went looking for an agent for about 6 months, and I eventually quickly gave that up and said, I'm just going to publish it myself.
It's so fascinating that you have to be a writer, but to be successful, you have to also be a marketer and a networker and an advertising expert and a social media expert. These skills are different, but it sounds like unless you have kind of the connections that you need, you have to do all these things to get noticed.
Yes. And that's very difficult because writers tend to be introverts. And I am very introverted. I'd rather, this whole COVID stay-at-home thing doesn't bother me at all, because I love to stay at home and get things done here, and I can do my writing here. And, but that is hard, and I didn't have a fan base because I didn't write a column for a paper, or I didn't have the famous parent or whatever to get me started. So that is hard. It's hard. It's very hard, and I've had to learn a lot in that respect.
What does success look like for you? Is it walking by a Barnes and Noble and seeing your book? Is it having a stranger in an airport, when we can all airport again, read your book? Like, is there something that you're hanging your hat on, that this is what success as an author looks like for me?
I love it when I get feedback from readers, and especially people that I don't know, I write exclusively through Amazon right now. With the benefit of that, I see what people in different countries, I can see who's reading my book. So if I log on, I can see someone in India is reading my book, or someone in England is reading my book. And that's really cool to me. I like to see that. And I love to get feedback. I'll get reviews from different readers on Amazon. They don't review much now as it seems like people used to. But And if I submit my book to a reviewer or to a blogger and say, hey, if you like my book, would you please write about it? And when they do, that's huge to me. Obviously I'd like to meet financial goals. I haven't met financial goals yet. I still struggle with marketing my book. I still struggle with getting it read, getting it out there. There are so many indie authors now because it's so easy to publish a book. So there's just a lot out there. So it's just a matter of getting it seen, and I still struggle with that.
So I finished your book Back in My Day last night, and it's so interesting to think about the inspiration behind it. I really enjoyed the book. What was fascinating for me is like you said, I read a lot of books. I am a self-proclaimed proud bibliophile. I am an English major. I have this kind of book addiction, perhaps. And I didn't realize how much language is in books that I read. And I'm not talking about, these are mainstream popular memoirs or nonfiction or fiction books, but there's just a lot of language that I never even noticed. I don't know, maybe I'm numb to it. But then I read your book and I noticed there wasn't any language. And one of the things that you talk about in doing research about you is you want things that your daughter could read. And there, unless I missed it, I don't think there's any 4-letter words in your book. And it surprised me because so many books have that as part of the language. So was that a conscious choice? And do you get feedback about that?
I do. So in my first book, I had language, and, I had a couple F-bombs, and I had a lot of feedback, and not a lot. I really only had a couple people give me feedback on that, but it was enough that I thought, oh, wow, people don't like that. And if people don't like reading those words, I don't want to put it in there. So one of the benefits of being an indie author and being self-published through something like Amazon is that you can go and you can upload a change. So if I notice editing errors after the fact, after it's been published the first time, I can go and I can change that. I just have to upload a new file. So I actually went in and I cleaned it up because I had enough feedback that made me uncomfortable. I don't want to make people uncomfortable reading my books. I don't want them to say, she's the F-bomb, I'm not going to read any more of her books. So I took that out. And it's easy to replace it with other words, but I definitely, back in my day, when I initially started that book, I wanted it to be a book that she and I wrote together because it was about a mom and a daughter that was the same age as my daughter at the time when I was writing it. I still wrote it and had her read it and give me feedback. Is this what a teenager would say? Is this what a teenager would do? Yes, no, yes. And she'd give me feedback on that. But definitely, I try to write it cleaner now because of the feedback I got from people.
It's so interesting to me that you got feedback that it was uncomfortable for people, because it's almost like when you watch a television show that's streaming and there's just things that can't be in network television. And then you watch a network television show and it's like, oh, right. This is what it used to be like. And it's changed over time. And Back in My Day really is about that cultural shift. And in the book, and I don't want to give too much away, but in the book, the mother and the daughter go back into the 80s. And so many of your references were, I remember, but I had forgotten. So even the fashion and there was like a Back to the Future kind of humor to it as well that I enjoyed. And obviously I'm in your target demo because it's written for women and probably women about my age group who are moms and thinking, gosh, if only I had more time, or if only things were like it was back in my day. So I thought the concept was really interesting. Do you struggle with inspiration for books, or do you have no trouble with the ideas?
It depends. I have an overactive imagination. Like I said, anxiety runs in my family, and the only good thing about it is that I conjure up a bunch of ridiculous what-if situations all the time. And so for my first few books, I would just write down things that come into my head, and I still do that. But after I wrote the first three, I did struggle with what I was working on next. And I've started a book that I'm probably 50% through. And it took me a long time to come up with that concept. And then I put it to the side, and I'm working on something that I hope to publish for Christmas. And that came to me like boom, and was quick, and I could write it down. So it's hit and miss with me. I do try to keep track of ridiculous situations I come up with in my head, and then I'll go back to them later when I'm looking for inspiration.
You mentioned before that you're an avid reader. Has what you read changed because now you're an author, or are you more judgy than you were before you did your own writing of books?
I think with age, what I like to read has changed a lot. I'll reread things that I read 10 or 15 years ago and absolutely loved back then. And I'll think, oh my gosh, why did I like this? And I don't know that being a writer has changed that, but I do know that reading certain books, especially chick lit or rom-com, I notice a trend, they call it a trope, of the same storyline over and over and over. And I was seeing a lot of ridiculous women who were scatterbrained and sleeping around. And that's not what I want my kid to read. I want my kid to read about a woman who's got her head on her shoulders and maybe she's gone through a rough time, but she figures it out. I want her to read about a person that doesn't feel like sleeping around is the solution to find love. I definitely think that my writing is influenced by what I read, just based on what I don't want to write about. If that makes any sense.
It does, and we'll put links to your website and to Amazon and those types of things on the Flip Your Script podcast website. And I saw something interesting on your website, which is the concept of what you're cooking, what you're reading, and what you're drinking. And I noticed you read Daisy Jones and the Six, which I loved that book as well. And you said you did, and it was such a fast read. What are you reading now? Or what should we all be reading now besides your books?
Right, besides my books, which you should read 3 or 4 times. I just finished Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, which is nonfiction. I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but I do love nonfiction occasionally. And I'm also reading, I think it's called You Should See Someone by Lori Gottlieb. That's also nonfiction, oddly. And then I also have 28 Summers by Ellen Hildebrand. That's kind of my easy breezy, can read in 2 days book. I write my blogs called Dinner, Drinkin' Book. It's loosely based on the old show that used to be around when I was in my 20s called Dinner and a Movie on TNT. And you would watch a movie and the hosts would cook dinner during commercials. And, I thought, well, this is kind of the same concept. I want to give people a meal to enjoy that's easy, and a book to read that they'll enjoy, and a drink to go with it, because that's fun. So I like to find good books to read, so I have something to review for that month. And I'm in a book club, fortunately, so sometimes I get inspiration from my fellow book club members, and otherwise I just have to read through a bunch of books to find something good to write about.
Makes sense. It is your job now, so you don't even have to feel bad, putting your feet up and like, I'm just doing some homework.
Right. Got to write my blog, got to read a book.
Got to make some more meals and drink a little more to just do research for the blog.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The tough life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The last question that I ask everyone on the podcast is there a quote or something that has motivated you?
So when I started all of this, thinking about becoming an author, thinking about publishing a book, and feeling very insecure about everything, I happened to be reading an article about Russell Wilson. And my husband and I are in fantasy football together, so I honestly think I was researching, what quarterback I wanted to draft or whatever. And I was reading an article about him and how when he was playing in high school, he was kind of a smaller than your typical quarterback. And his dad was yet always encouraging him and saying, you're going to play in the NFL. You're going to be a Super Bowl quarterback someday. And he would say to his dad, why me, Dad? I'm smaller than everyone else out there. Why me? And his dad would say, why not you? And he kind of went with that. He listened to his dad and he thought, exactly, why not me? I try. Just because everyone else is bigger, I can still be a success. And that really struck me because, again, I'm not an English major. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I'm not a famous person. I haven't written in a publication before. But I can write. Anyone with a good grasp of the English language that can tell a story can write. I don't like that we feel like we have to be pigeonholed into these careers or certain things we're supposed to do. And I just kept thinking, like he did, why not me? That's the quote that has inspired me and really helped me along the way.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and keep writing. I can't wait to see what your next book is.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
One of the things that really struck me about Maggie's story is to lean into your passion, whether or not the people around you are encouraging you or not. Now, thank goodness her husband said your book is good, or would she have kept writing? We don't know. But there are so many voices, and especially with social media and different people who will say things that may or may not affirm with what you believe about yourself. So this concept of an identity that's always shifting and a challenge to let's lift each other up. When we are going to try something new or make decisions, let's lift each other up and not question each other or judge. My hope is that Maggie's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Kristi Piehl and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share our episodes with your family and friends. Do you or someone you know have a story about flipping your script? We'd love to share it. Contact us on our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com. To stay up to date on all things Flip Your Script, make sure to follow host Kristi Piehl on social media. You can also check out the website for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and other great episodes.